Don't let me die, please. The voices gurgled, frantic, breaking through the splash of water and gasps from the crowd. Ethan Harrington's arms thrash uselessly, his polished shoes pulling him deeper into the glowing blue of the pool. The guests stand frozen in their glittering gowns and crisp tuxedos. Someone screams, no one moves. Only one figure breaks the spell, a blur of brown skin, faded maid's uniform, and desperate resolve. Amara dives headfirst into the water. Her braids float like ribbons as she claws through the chlorine burn, arms straining, lungs aching until she reaches him. Her hands grip his collar. His body is limp, heavier than stone. She kicks, gasps, pulls, dragging him back toward the surface as the laughter and chatter of the party are replaced by horrified silence. The night should have ended there, with triumph, with gratitude. But the story did not begin at the pool. It began long before, in the echoing marble halls of the Harrington estate. Ethan Harrington, 25, leaned against the glass wall of his penthouse living room, a tumbler of whiskey dangling from his fingertips. His blonde hair was artfully tousled, his suit jacket flung carelessly over the arm of a chair. Below him, Los Angeles shimmered like a jeweled necklace, every light a reminder that he was at the top. His friends sprawled across the couches, their laughter loud, empty, gilded. "Another party, Ethan? Didn't we just drain your bar last weekend?" teased Carter Vale, lean and sharp in his designer shirt. Ethan smirked, raising his glass. "There's no such thing as too much of a good thing. Besides, what else is there to do in this city but remind it who owns the sky?" The others laughed. They always did. His words were treated as gospel, not because they were wise, but because they came from him, Harrington, heir to the empire. In the kitchen, out of sight, Amara Lui scrubbed a crystal glass, her hands moving with practiced care. She was 21, her uniform pressed through the fabric was fraying at the cuffs. She had high cheekbones, warm brown eyes that absorbed every detail, and the kind of posture that spoke of both weariness and pride. Every step she took was quiet, deliberate. She kept her head down, but her ears heard everything. "Amara!" Ethan's voice cut across the marble. She flinched instinctively before stepping into view. "Yes, Mr. Harrington? Bring more ice. And make it quick, girl." The word girl was like a slap. She hated it. How it erased her name, her presence. But she swallowed it, nodding silently. As she left the room, Carter leaned toward Ethan. "She's pretty, for help. Don't you think?" His voice was low, teasing. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "She's invisible. That's her job." Invisible. The word stung, though Amara never let her face betray it. She returned with the ice, set it down carefully, and slipped away before the laughter behind her could cut deeper. Later that evening, Amara found herself alone in the grand hallway, polishing the railing. The chandeliers overhead glimmered like constellations, but she felt no wonder. This place was a cage of glass and gold. Her brother's face rose in her mind, Jeremiah, only 16, his textbooks spread out on their kitchen table back home. He wanted college. He deserved it. This job was her way of paying for it, even if it meant swallowing insults. The front door opened with a flourish. Guests arrived in waves, women in gowns that shimmered like liquid metal, men in suits cut sharp as knives. Music pulsed from hidden speakers, champagne flowed, and the pool outside glowed an impossible shade of turquoise. Amara moved quietly between them, clearing glasses, replenishing trays, ignored like a shadow. A drunken laugh rang out. A woman pointed at her headscarf and whispered something cruel to her friend. Both giggled. Amara's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes lowered. At the center of it all stood Ethan, radiant and careless, the host who soaked in admiration like sunlight. His smile was effortless, his hand gestures grand. He was a man convinced he could never fall. But fate was already waiting by the water's edge. The party reached its height near midnight. Music throbbed, laughter spilled across the marble, and Ethan, more drunk than he realized, wandered toward the infinity pool. The crowd followed, champagne glasses in hand, their voices echoing into the night air. "Speech!" someone shouted. Ethan grinned, swaying slightly as he raised his glass. "To beauty, to wealth, to—" His foot caught the slick marble. He stumbled. A gasp tore through the crowd as his body tipped backward, striking the edge of the pool with a sickening thud, before sliding into the glowing water. For one frozen moment, no one moved. The music still pulsed, the surface rippled, then went still. And then, his muffled cry, "Don't let me die, please," rose from beneath the water. The guests screamed but clutched their clothes, their jewels, their vanity. Ethan's arms flailed weakly, his body sinking lower. Amara didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted past the crowd, past the gasps and useless cries, and dove into the pool. Cold water swallowed her, but she pushed through it, lungs burning, arms slicing. Her fingers found his collar. His weight dragged her down, but she kicked, fought, refused to let him go. She dragged him upward, coughing as they broke the surface. The crowd stared, silent, as the black maid pulled the millionaire air from the water. The air was thick with silence, broken only by Ethan's ragged coughs and Amara's desperate gasps. She laid him on the marble, pressing her palms hard against his chest until he sputtered and expelled a lungful of chlorinated water. The crowd leaned back, grimacing at the wet spray, some covering their mouths, others snapping quick glances at each other as if to ask, "Should we help? Should we touch him?" No one did. It was Amara, dripping, trembling, her uniform clinging to her frame, who leaned close and whispered, "Breathe. You're safe now." Ethan blinked against the blur of light and faces. The last thing he remembered was water filling his lungs. The first thing he saw upon waking was her. Her dark eyes, alive with fear and determination. For a fleeting moment, gratitude flickered across his face, but then, the weight of humiliation settled in. He was Ethan Harrington, heir, charmer, untouchable, and here he was, splayed out, coughing like a child, saved not by his friends, not by anyone of his circle, but by his maid. "Ethan, man, are you okay?" Carter rushed forward at last, crouching beside him with forced concern. Others gathered, their murmurs a toxic blend of pity and amusement. "Did you see that? She just jumped in like some lifeguard." "Unbelievable. The maid saved him?" "Imagine the headlines." Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand shot out, waving Amara away as though she were a nuisance. "I'm fine. Get back inside, all of you." His voice was hoarse, but it carried authority. Amara froze, her wet braids dripping onto the marble. For a moment her chest tightened, expecting at least acknowledgement, but none came. He wouldn't even look at her. "Yes, sir," she murmured, rising on unsteady legs. As she turned, a woman in a sequined dress whispered loud enough for all to hear, "How tragic! Saved by the help. That'll bruise his ego." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ethan heard it. He flushed, but said nothing. Inside, Amara wrung out her sleeves in the kitchen, her body shivering from the cold. Her teeth chattered softly as she pulled a towel from the drawer and wrapped it around her shoulders. She told herself she shouldn't care. She didn't save him for thanks. She did it because no one else would. Because letting someone drown, even someone who treated her like furniture, wasn't something she could live with. Still, the dismissal stung. Upstairs, Ethan sat shirtless on the edge of his bed, his skin pale, his chest rising unsteadily. Carter lounged nearby, drink in hand. "You're lucky she was there, man," Carter said with a crooked grin. "Otherwise we'd be planning your funeral instead of your next party." Ethan shot him a glare. "Drop it." Carter smirked. "You should have seen her, though. The maid? She dove in without hesitation. Guess you owe her." He sipped his drink. "Doesn't that bruise you a little?" Ethan's fists clenched. "I don't owe her anything. She was doing her job." "Job? Saving your life wasn't in her contract." Carter's tone was playful, but his eyes gleamed with cruelty. "Face it, Ethan. Tonight, your reputation drowned, and she pulled it back out." Ethan said nothing, but inside, the words festered. The next morning, Amara moved quietly through the kitchen, folding freshly laundered napkins. Her body ached from the night before, but her mind was sharper than ever. She replayed the scene again and again, his hand waving her away, the laughter of his friends. "Amara." The voice startled her. Ethan stood in the doorway, dressed casually in a white shirt and tailored trousers. His hair was damp from the shower, his expression unreadable. She straightened instinctively. "Yes, sir?" His gaze flicked to her hands, then to her face. For once, he seemed uncertain. "About last night, you did well." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't gratitude. just two clipped words that might as well have been tossed crumbs. Her lips parted, then pressed shut. She swallowed her reply, nodding once. Yes, sir. But her eyes betrayed her disappointment. Ethan noticed. For the first time, he felt the sting of shame, not because of what she'd done, but because of what he hadn't. The humiliation didn't end there. News of the incident spread quickly through his circle, carried in whispers and sly jokes. At a rooftop bar 2 nights later, a group of women leaned into each other, giggling. So, Ethan, tell us again, how does it feel to have your life saved by your maid? Will she be your date to the gala? Maybe she can keep you from tripping over your own feet. Laughter erupted. Ethan forced a grin, raising his glass, but the heat in his cheeks betrayed him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one in control of the story. And in the quiet corners of his mansion, Amara polished silver, humming softly to herself, songs of survival her mother once sang. While Ethan Harrington wrestled with the truth he didn't want to face, his world, his pride, and his place within it were no longer untouchable. The Harrington estate gleamed the following weekend, chandeliers polished, gardens manicured, every tile of marble shining. Ethan had planned another gathering, determined to bury the memory of his near drowning beneath more champagne, more laughter, more carefully curated spectacle. Yet the story lingered, uninvited, slipping into every conversation. By the time the guests began to arrive, the whispers had already started. That's him. The one who nearly drowned. And the maid saved him, right? Can you imagine? Embarrassing, really. You'd think someone like him would know how to swim. Ethan greeted them with his usual smirk, but his eyes darted, scanning faces for mockery. He tugged his cuffs sharply, his posture straighter than usual, as though standing taller could erase the memory. Inside, Amara arranged champagne flutes on a tray. Her uniform was freshly pressed, though the fabric had grown thin from years of washings. Her movements were steady, graceful, though her mind wow as a storm. She could already hear the guests' laughter drifting toward her from the patio. She set the tray down, took a slow breath, and whispered to herself, "It doesn't matter. Jeremiah's tuition. That's what matters." By midnight, the estate pulsed with music. Dresses glittered, heels clicked against marble, and the infinity pool glowed like liquid sapphire. Ethan stood at the center, a practiced host, laughing louder than usual, drinking faster, desperate to reclaim control. Carter Vale, his ever-present shadow, leaned against the bar with a sly grin. "Careful tonight, Ethan. Don't want to end up back in the pool, do you?" His words dripped with amusement. Laughter bubbled around him. Ethan's jaw tightened. Across the patio, Amara carried a tray through the crowd. She moved quietly, eyes down, but she felt the heat of every gaze. "Hey, isn't that her?" a woman in a silver gown whispered, her champagne glass glinting. "The one who dove in after him?" Another woman giggled. "Heroic. Though honestly, a maid in the pool? I'd have fainted from the chlorine alone." The group laughed, the sound sharp as glass. As Amara passed, one of them stretched out a manicured hand, plucking a glass from her tray. "Thank you, lifeguard," she said with mock sweetness. The tray trembled in Amara's grip, but she forced her voice to remain even. "You're welcome." She walked away before they could see her cheeks burn. Later, Ethan found himself surrounded by his closest circle, their laughter thick with cruelty. Carter raised his glass. "Gentlemen, I propose a toast to Ethan Harrington. May he always have a maid nearby when he forgets how to swim." The crowd erupted in laughter. Ethan froze, glass halfway to his lips. For a moment, he thought he could laugh it off. But the sound of it, shrill, unkind, cut deeper than he expected. His eyes flicked toward Amara, who stood in the corner refilling trays. Their gazes met for a brief, searing instant. Her expression was unchanged, readable, but her silence spoke louder than anything. The humiliation worsened when Carter, drunk and reckless, beckoned Amara forward. "Hey, hero, come here." She paused, uncertain. Ethan's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Carter grinned at the group, then at her. "Show us how you did it. You know, saving our boy here. Maybe a reenactment? Ethan can fall backward, and you can scoop him up again." The crowd howled. Amara's throat tightened, her hands curled at her sides. She wanted to walk away, but the weight of her job chained her in place. Slowly, she shook her head. "That won't be necessary, sir." Carter feigned a pout. "Oh, come on, don't be shy." A woman's voice rang out, high and cruel. "Maybe she's afraid she'll drag him down this time." The laughter that followed was merciless. Amara turned, tray pressed tight against her chest, and walked briskly toward the kitchen. Her eyes stung, her breath sharp in her throat. She pushed through the swinging door, leaning against the counter, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Invisible. That was her place here. Until she wasn't. And then she was a joke. Meanwhile, Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. Carter's laughter grated on him, echoing too close to truth. For the first time, Ethan felt the sting of shame not just for himself but for what he allowed. He had stood silent while they mocked the woman who saved his life. Inside the kitchen, Amara pressed her palms flat against the counter, breathing hard. She whispered, "You're stronger than this. Don't let them break you." But as the laughter outside swelled, she wondered how much longer she could endure. Back on the patio, Carter raised his glass again, smirking. "To Ethan, our golden boy, saved by his maid. May she always be around to keep him from drowning." The guests roared with laughter, glasses clinking in cruel celebration. Ethan forced a smile, but his chest burned. Their laughter wasn't with him anymore, it was at him. And in that laughter he heard the truth. He wasn't untouchable. Not anymore. The laughter still rang in Ethan's ears long after the last guest had gone. The patio lay silent now, littered with empty glasses and cigarette butts. But he couldn't shake the echo of Carter's cruel toast. He stood alone by the pool, staring at the black water. It reflected nothing back, only a void. Behind him, the faint scrape of dishes drifted from the kitchen. Amara was still working, still cleaning up after the mess his so-called friends had left behind. Something inside him snapped. For years he had lived above consequence, above humility. But tonight, the sound of their mocking had hollowed him out. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that wealth couldn't shield him from disgrace. His eyes burned, his hands trembled, and then he moved. Amara was stacking glasses into a crate when the door burst open. She startled, nearly dropping one, and turned to find Ethan standing there. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his face pale but burning with something raw. "Why didn't you fight back?" His voice was hoarse, uneven. Amara blinked. "Excuse me?" "At the party," he said, stepping forward, his words tumbling in a rush. "When they mocked you, when they laughed, you just stood there, you let them." His voice cracked, frustration and shame colliding. Her eyes darkened. "What did you expect me to do, Mr. Harrington? Shout at your guests? Risk the job I need to keep my brother in school? If I fought back, I'd be out on the street before sunrise, and you know it." The words hit him like a blow. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. Amara set the glass down with deliberate care. "I don't have the luxury of pride, sir. I can't afford it." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, to Amara's shock, Ethan's composure shattered. His shoulders slumped. His face crumpled. He dropped to his knees on the tile floor. "I'm sorry." His voice broke on the word. "God, Amara, I'm sorry." Her breath caught. "I let them laugh at you," he continued, eyes wet now, his voice raw. "I laughed at you. I treated you like you weren't even human. And then you—" His throat closed, forcing the words out ragged. "You saved me. You should have let me drown." Tears slipped down his face. His chest heaved. The heir, the golden boy, the untouchable millionaire, was on his knees before her, undone. Amara stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had imagined many things in this house, being ignored, insulted, even fired, but never this. Slowly she crouched down so their eyes met. "I would never let you drown," she said quietly. "Not because of you, because of me. Because I couldn't live with myself if I stood by and watched." Her words steadied him, though his tears didn't stop. He bowed his head, voice trembling. "I don't deserve your kindness." "You don't," she admitted, her tone firm but not cruel. "But that's not the point." For the first time, Ethan had no defense, no charm, no mask, only silence. The sound of footsteps startled them both. Carter leaned lazily against the doorway, smirk tugging at his lips. Well, well, what's this? Ethan Harrington on his knees. For his maid?" Ethan stiffened, rising unsteadily to his feet, shame replaced by a flicker of anger. "Get out," he said, his voice low. Carter chuckled. "Don't tell me you're actually apologizing to her." "That's pathetic, Ethan. You're Harrington. You don't kneel for anyone." Ethan's fists clenched. "I said, get out." Carter's grin faltered. He'd never seen Ethan like this. Raw, furious, unmasked. Amara rose too, stepping back, her eyes darting between them. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally Carter scoffed, tossing back the last of his drink. "Fine, but don't expect anyone to respect you after this." He strode out, the door swinging shut behind him. Silence returned, heavy and fragile. Ethan turned back to Amara, his voice quieter now. "They don't matter, not anymore. But you, I need you to know I'm not that man, not anymore." Amara studied him, uncertain. His eyes, once sharp, careless blue, now looked almost human. For the first time since she stepped into this house, she believed he might mean it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the Harrington estate, softening the hard marble edges that had witnessed too much the night before. Amara tied her headscarf with practiced precision, her reflection in the pantry's small mirror, steady though her thoughts were not. Ethan's breakdown replayed in her mind, his voice cracking, his knees on the tile, his words raw and desperate. Part of her had wanted to believe him. Part of her warned not to. In the grand dining room, Ethan sat alone at the head of the table. His breakfast, fresh fruit, eggs, toast, remained untouched. He stared at his hands as if searching for answers there. When Amara entered to pour his coffee, he rose quickly. "Amara," he said softly. "No girl, no clipped commands, just her name, spoken like it mattered." She paused, pitcher in hand, waiting. His gaze met hers. "Last night wasn't a performance. I meant every word." Her brow furrowed. She poured the coffee in silence, then set the pot down. "Words are easy, Mr. Harrington. They cost nothing." Ethan flinched. "Then I'll prove it, however I can." She held his gaze for a beat, then turned to leave. "We'll see." Word of Ethan's late-night humiliation traveled fast. By afternoon, Carter was already spreading the story like wildfire. At a rooftop lounge, among their wealthy circle, Carter relished the gasps and laughter. "On his knees," he declared, grinning as champagne fizzed in his glass. "For the maid, begging like a sinner at confession. You should have seen it." The group roared with cruel delight. Ethan Harrington, brought down by his help? Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Maybe he's lost it, or maybe he's finally found his type. Their laughter was merciless. By evening, the story had twisted into scandal, carried through texts, whispers, headlines in society blogs. Millionaire's meltdown, Harrington on his knees to his maid. Ethan saw it all. He felt the walls closing in, but this time, instead of drowning in shame, he stood taller. If his old world wanted to laugh, let them. That night, another party buzzed at the Harrington estate, though this one was smaller, tighter, his inner circle only. Carter was there, of course, sipping gin with his trademark smirk. Amara moved quietly through the crowd, carrying trays, but she sensed the tension brewing like a storm. Carter lifted his glass, voice loud enough for everyone. "Shall we toast again? To Ethan, the man who kneels where he shouldn't." Laughter crackled. Ethan froze, then placed his glass down with deliberate care. He rose, his gaze steady on Carter. "Enough." The crowd stilled. Carter arched a brow. "What's the matter? Afraid the truth hurts?" Ethan's jaw set. "No. Afraid of how small you sound." Gasps rippled. The guests exchanged stunned looks. Never before had Ethan Harrington turned his sharp tongue against one of his own. Carter chuckled, but unease flickered in his eyes. "You've lost your edge, Ethan. First the drowning, then the crying, now defending your maid. You're not Harrington anymore. You're a joke." For a heartbeat, silence held. Then Ethan spoke, voice firm, unshaken. "No. The joke is thinking money makes you more human than anyone else. She saved my life, and I let you all laugh at her. I won't make that mistake again." All eyes turned to Amara. Her tray wobbled slightly in her hands, her chest tightening. The guests shifted, murmuring. Some smirked, others frowned, uncertain which way he whined would blow. Carter scoffed. So what now? She's your equal. Ethan stepped forward, his blue eyes locked on Carter's. She's more than my equal. She has something you'll never have, dignity, and the courage to act when the rest of us froze. The words landed like thunder. The room broke into whispers, astonished gasps, the careful shifting of loyalties. A few faces softened toward Amara. Others turned cold toward Carter. The tide was turning, and everyone felt it. Carter's smirk cracked. For the first time, he looked rattled. Ethan, chest heaving, turned to Amara. His voice softened, but it carried through the stunned silence. You deserve better than this house, these people. Better than me. But until the day you walk out, I'll treat you the way I should have from the start. With respect. Amara's throat tightened. The tray in her hands felt impossibly heavy. She had no words, only the warmth of a truth she never thought she'd hear in this house. And for the first time, Ethan Harrington wasn't the one being applauded or mocked. He was simply heard. The story of Ethan's defiance spread even faster than Carter's mockery had. By morning, the social blogs were ablaze again. Harrington turns on his own, publicly defends his maid against friends. From scandal to redemption, Ethan Harrington shocks inner circle. Some mocked him harder, others surprisingly praised him. For the first time, Ethan's name was not just tied to wealth and arrogance, but to something more unexpected, humility. In the estate, however, the fallout was immediate. Carter arrived uninvited, his jaw tight, his sunglasses failing to hide the fury in his eyes. You embarrassed me, he hissed, cornering Ethan in the study. You embarrassed us. Ethan's gaze was steady. No, Carter, I embarrassed myself long before last night. You just helped me see it. Carter's fists curled. Don't think you can play saint now, you'll regret this. Maybe, Ethan replied, calmly, but not as much as I'd regret staying silent. Amara overheard fragments of the exchange from the hall. Her heart pounded as she returned to dusting the shelves, her hands trembling slightly. For weeks she had endured Carter's cruelty, Ethan's silence, the guests' laughter. Now, for the first time, someone had spoken her name in defense. But she remained cautious. Words were words. That evening, she was polishing silver when Ethan appeared at the doorway. Amara, he said softly. She straightened, cloth in hand. Yes, sir? His eyes searched hers. I want to make this right. Not just between us, but for everyone to see. Would you allow me that chance? Her chest tightened. Why? To clear your name? To turn scandal into sympathy? His jaw clenched, but his voice was steady. No, because you saved my life, and I made yours smaller. I can't undo that, but I can own it. She studied him for a long moment, then returned to her work. We'll see if your actions match your words. 2 nights later, at another gala, this one a charity event flooded with cameras and reporters, Ethan arrived with his usual poise. But when he stepped onto the stage to give his speech, murmurs swept the room. Standing just behind him, tray in hand, was Amara. The crowd leaned forward, anticipating a spectacle. Carter smirked from the back, certain Ethan would stumble. Ethan gripped the microphone, his eyes scanning the audience. Many of you know me as someone who has everything. Money, influence, privilege. But not long ago, I nearly lost everything in an instant. The crowd hushed. I drowned. Not just in water, but in pride. And the only reason I'm standing here today is because someone I failed to respect, someone I failed to even see, chose to save me anyway. Gasps rippled. Cameras flashed. Ethan turned, gesturing to Amara. This is Amara Lewis. She is not a tray. Invisible. She is not the help. She is the reason I am alive. And from this night forward, she will never again be treated as less than the extraordinary woman she is. For a heartbeat, silence. Then applause. Hesitant at first, then swelling, then thunderous. Some clapped politely, others sincerely, but the sound filled the hall. Amara stood frozen, the spotlight burning against her skin. Her chest rose and fell in quick bursts, her eyes wide. She had not asked for this, not the attention, not the spectacle, but in that moment she saw something in Ethan's face that hadn't been there before, sincerity without pride. At the back of the room, Carter's smirk collapsed into a grimace. His circle whispered, their loyalty shifting, their eyes sliding away from him and toward Ethan. The balance had tipped. After the event, Amara slipped into the kitchen to catch her breath. Her hands shook as she pressed them against the counter. For years she had been a shadow. Now she had been pulled into the light without asking for it. The door opened behind her. Ethan stepped in, removing his tie, his face still flushed from the speech. "I hope I didn't overstep," he said carefully. Her voice was soft but firm. "You did. But maybe it was time someone did." He exhaled, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to return it. Just a little. That night, Ethan Harrington lay awake in his vast, empty room, the echoes of applause in his ears. For once, it wasn't the sound of wealth or power. It was the sound of respect, hard-earned, fragile, but real. And he vowed not to let it slip through his fingers again. The Harrington estate was quieter in the weeks that followed. The parties slowed, the endless stream of shallow guests thinned. Where once the marble halls rang with hollow laughter, now they breathed a softer rhythm, meals taken in smaller company, the occasional quiet evening without champagne or spectacle. Maid Ethan had dismissed Carter for good. Their friendship, built on vanity and cruelty, had collapsed under the weight of truth. The social circle that had once circled Ethan like moths to flame now regarded him with cautious distance. Some respected his change, others sneered, but Ethan no longer cared. What mattered was different now. Amara noticed it in small things first. The way Ethan spoke her name, always with respect. The way he thanked her for meals, or offered to carry his own glass to the kitchen. Once, she found him polishing the silver alongside her, his clumsy hands leaving streaks she had to fix. But his effort, awkward and earnest, startled her more than his wealth ever had. For the first time she began to see not the arrogant boy who had waved her away by the pool, but a man, flawed, learning, breaking open in ways she hadn't thought possible. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the wide windows, Amara sat at the edge of the garden, her hands folded in her lap. She rarely allowed herself rest in this house, but today she took it, watching the koi glide in their pond, listening to the rustle of the palm trees. Ethan appeared, not in a suit, but in a plain shirt and rolled-up sleeves. He hesitated, then sat beside her. "I'm leaving the city," he said after a pause. Her brow furrowed. "Leaving?" He nodded, staring at the water. "Selling the estate, stepping away from the parties, the noise. None of it matters anymore. Not the way I thought it did." He glanced at her, his voice softer. "I want to start over, to live a life that means something." Amara studied him, searching for the arrogance she once despised. But it wasn't there. What she saw instead was uncertainty, vulnerability, a man stripped bare of pride. "And where do I fit into that?" she asked quietly. His throat tightened. "Wherever you want. You owe me nothing. You've given me more than I deserve already. But if you ever let me, I'd like to make things right, not just with words, but with my life." Silence settled between them, tender and fragile. The koi swam on, unbothered. Amara turned back to the pond, her voice calm but firm. "I don't need promises, Ethan. I don't need speeches. What I need is consistency, respect that doesn't fade when the spotlight does." He nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll give." The final gathering at the Harrington estate was not a party, but a farewell. No chandeliers glittering, no champagne towers, just a handful of staff, a few genuine friends, and Ethan himself, standing by the pool where everything had begun. He raised a simple glass of water. "This house has seen more arrogance than kindness, more pride than truth. Tonight, that ends. Tomorrow it will belong to someone else. And as for me, I'm grateful, above all, to the person who reminded me what it means to be human." He turned, meeting Amara's eyes. For once, she did not look away. The guests clapped politely, some touched, some puzzled. But Ethan didn't care. The words weren't for them. They were for her. Later, as the last of the staff trickled out, Amara lingered by the pool. The water glowed softly under the night sky, a mirror of the evening when everything changed. Ethan joined her, his reflection shimmering beside hers. "I used to think this pool was a symbol of my wealth," he said quietly. "Now I see it as the place I died, and the place I was reborn." Amara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Maybe it's both." They stood together in silence, the night air warm around them. No declarations, no grand gestures. Just two people, once divided by power, now bound by truth, sharing a moment of quiet recognition. Amara finally turned to him. "Don't waste what you've been given, Ethan. Not the second chance, not the respect. Don't waste it." "I won't," he said, his voice steady. And for the first time, she believed him. The story closed, not with a kiss, nor a fairy tale ending, but with something rarer. The beginning of dignity restored, respect earned, and the fragile hope of lives forever changed by one night, one pool, one choice to act when no one else would.